All right, I'm Chad Harder here with Gene Johnson. Gene's been here 7 years at Tri-Center. He teaches high school social studies, history, and I had the pleasure of observing him 2 separate days, once with a lecture and questioning day, and another one when he went into his group projects. Gene's very innovative in what he does. I've watched him in our AIW group and how he collaborates and things like that, so I have a good feel kind of how Gene does things and what he does. So, all right, first of all, can you please just describe your lesson about what I watched over the past couple days?
It was just kind of a lesson over the Palmer raids, which took place in the 1920s, kind of xenophobia. U.S. government basically went after suspected communists and anarchists and removed them out. And it fits kind of our bigger question of what to do with immigration, and also how much of our freedom should we be giving up for security.
Okay, and I know one thing you talked about was in the pre-observation, just kind of getting kids to think outside the box and think bigger. Was that something you felt you kind of accomplished in this lesson?
It's really hard to tell. You know, those big thoughts and things, I'm just getting to some of their essays that they had to do after all these lessons and stuff to kind of grade that, but that high order thinking is still a tough area for me to assess.
Okay. Now, during your lesson, the 2 days I watched you, what do you think went well, and what will you definitely keep for next year going forward?
I think, you know, the kids, you know, they did the reading well. You know, I mean, the reading wasn't anything too difficult. The project, for the most part, it went well. You know, we're still struggling with getting every kid to do their fair share within those projects, but for the most part, I think, you know, they got the nuts and bolts of the reading and understanding the reading well, which was primary sources.
Okay. Is there anything you would do different in the lesson just to make it more effective?
I think maybe I would assign groups instead of letting them choose their own groups. Just make them work with different kids, different people.
Okay. What did you think of? I know you had a question worksheet and different things you asked in class. What did you think of that when you did that? Do you think that was do you think most kids got it, or do you think most kids understood what type of high-level question you were trying to get?
I think most of them are getting it. You know, it all kind of comes from the Stanford History Education group. So, you know, it's not the first time that they've seen sources like this and questions kind of phrased like this. It's something we keep practicing, keep building on. And at this point of the year, most of them have gotten it. You know, they kind of understand what we're trying to do with these primary sources and understanding them.
So, do you, in the end, do you feel like they really understood the whole lesson, the big picture of what you were trying to do?
For the most part, yes. For the most part, I think they did understand that we're trying to make them just think that there is no right answer. So, for the most part, I think they all understand that.
What did you think of the group project when you did it? I know I was able to walk around and kind of see what things were going. What did you think, and did it meet your expectations?
It did. You know, obviously they ended up giving a presentation over an issue that deals with times that we've sacrificed security for freedom. Most of them did a really nice job with it. I also had an essay that went with it, and you could tell some of them really did the work, understood what they were doing. About 5 or 6 of them just kind of rode the coattails in their essays. Their understanding of it, the concepts, were not as good. So how do we get every kid to be on the same high level?
Right. Have you thought about that? What are things you could change, do you believe, that could make everybody be involved in this group?
Yeah, it's just a struggle. You know, it's always a struggle. There's always those kids behind that you just keep trying to pull up, and there's different techniques. I let them choose it this time, hoping that like the high achievers would group themselves together, and then the low achievers would group themselves together just kind of naturally without me, you know, having to put them in those type of groups, and those low achievers would be forced them to work together and find the concepts. It just wasn't as high as I was hoping.
When you were planning and carrying through the lesson, in what ways do you feel you were like trying to meet district and state standards? I mean, were you just basically, you know, what did you do to try to meet those standards?
Well, this reading really fits the social studies literacy that Iowa Corps has really been pushing out, which is why I've been using. that website for primary sources, because it just makes it easier to find complex text for those kids to read. So that part, kind of leading into it and basing it around those sources versus the textbook, I think really helps meet those new Iowa core standards. And then focusing more on concepts, like the question of how much freedom are we willing to give up for security versus we're just going to teach the Palmer raids of the 1920s, and then we're going to move to Sokol and Vanzetti and things like that. I think that really fits kind of what Iowa's trying to do with those Common Core things.
And I know we talked about teaching standards and just talking about how you're really trying to get kids involved in different ways and grow professionally. You know, like how do you think this lesson or even parts of this year helped you grow professionally?
Well, I think I've become more aware of high order questioning, you know, asking the why and the how versus these are the facts that you need to know. I still think there's a time and place for trivial knowledge, but we've tried to really emphasize that high order, make an argument within our assessments. So.
Did you feel like the AIW we're doing here in your collaboration group, did it make this lesson better or help you with some standards? What do you think with that?
I think AIW has helped all my lessons, because this isn't one that we talked about in AIW, but you know, applying some of those how would this, why is this significant, those type of questions that we talk about with every lesson in AIW have started trickling with all my lessons, and I think for the most part I have a lot more high order lessons.
Okay.
So.
I think you brought some documents for me or data.
Yeah.
You believe we could use in this? Okay. Why do you think this is the quality data? And this is your questioning sheet that I sent in. Why do you think this data is good for me?
Well, it's just kind of the main questions of what we're trying to do with our readings. You can see here, this is the one on the back is the one I focus on the most. It's a paragraph, so it's something I can grade quickly. I can get that feedback to students relatively quickly. Why did the Palmer raids, what is it, arrest thousands of people and deport hundreds between 1919 and 1920? Well, you know, that's just, they lay it out so nicely where I can grade it and I can get feedback immediately. You know, if I were doing these big research papers all the time, feedback would never get back to students in a timely manner. So breaking it up and having quick paragraphs that I can look at during my prep, get it back to them within a day or two, really helps with that feedback area.
Okay. And this data is something, I mean, you can use saying how many you think you got through to and to what extent. You know, how do you think, you know, I know we discussed this a little earlier, but this data in particular, why do you think it made them think at such a high level?
Open-ended questions. You know, the readings, there's two sides to it, so it's not set in stone, it's not fill in the blank. It's, you can read it and you can take it one way, you can read it and you can take it a different way. You just have to set that argument. So.
Are there other ways you feel you can assess your students besides the questioning reflection sheet? And I know you talked about essays, but is there any other way that you felt you could assess your students?
From a high order standpoint, I think these quick essays, these paragraph essays where they have to write a short argument with evidence is the best way, just because I can get it back quickly. When they're working in groups, I try to use observational assessment and data, but I try not to give very many points to that, just because I don't want to punish kid A because he's in a back group. So most of my assessment, most of my data comes from those type of things, which is still subjective.
And we talked about the group work that you were not necessarily struggling, but looking for better ways to grade them while they're in their groups instead of just the final product. You know, because sometimes you run into kids who one kid does it all. Okay, they want to be in this kid's group because he's going to do it. And I got a couple different rubrics for you that what you can do is you can look around and as you go to different groups, you can give them scores. So a 1 through 4 here. Or on this one, you can do whatever you want. If you do an ABC or satisfactory, these are some guidelines that I thought would help you in that. And, now, we talked about professional growth. this, you know, and I know I've been around here teaching a lot, but at the same time, as far as professional growth, how would all of this together, as far as your professional growth, as far as doing projects, doing questioning, doing lecture, how do you think you've grown professionally through lessons like this?
Well, like I said, I do think my students are looking and reading at a higher level. They're arguing better. It's just, how do we get better discussion among all of the students? How do we get better group work among all the students? How do we get those bottom 20% students to rise to the top and be positive contributors and be able to do the in-depth discussion and things like that?
Okay. And do you have any questions or comments about the lesson, or have anything for me?
No, I mean, it's just, you know, we're still trying to get better discussion. You know, student-led discussions after reading these things. You were in there, we were talking about those Pomeroy's, those documents. It was me asking all the questions. How do we get to that next step where the kids are kind of asking the questions and bouncing questions and, you know, thought among each other?
And, you know, and one thing, you know, we'll continue to look at this next year, and I'll continue to stop in when we talk about the group, when you're getting the group projects, because I'd like to see if these help you grow and maybe help out some of the bottom end kids we've been talking about. So, all right, hey, thank you very much.
Yeah.